So I'm Bob Isaacson, and I'm the president of Dharma Voices for Animals, the only international Buddhist animal rights organization in the world. And I'm here today with a member of our advisory board, Will Tuttle. Will's an author. He'll tell you about himself. And Will and I have been talking about the two issues we're going to discuss today quite a bit over the years, and we want to share some of our thoughts with you today. So, Will, why don't we get started with what do you see as the greatest challenges in the Buddhist world today to transitioning to veganism?
Thanks, Bob. It's great that everybody is able to join us on this call. You know, from my perspective, as the author of The World Peace Diet, former Zen monk, and been able to travel actually quite a bit like you have over the last 10 years or so to Asia and all around the United States and Europe, talking about veganism and talking to Buddhist groups as well as progressive groups in general, environmental groups, and so forth. The vegan movement, as everybody knows, is really growing, I think quite strongly in many ways in general. And we have some major challenges, I think, just the ingrained inertia in our society is probably one of the greatest challenges that we're facing. The good news, I think, from the point of view of the Buddhist community worldwide, is that there's a foundational teaching within the Buddhist Dharma that compassion for all living beings is really the foundational teaching. So it's not like some of the more Western religions that we see animals merely as objects to be used. We're the only ones made in the image of God, and animals aren't, that kind of thing. There really is this foundational connection with the sense that other sentient beings are deserving of our treatment of kindness and compassion. So when I go to China or to Vietnam or Taiwan or Korea or these other countries to speak or to share these ideas, pretty much most people say that anyone who's a vegan is a Buddhist. They're there because of their religion, which is very different, obviously, from the West. So I think that the main challenges really that are being faced in many ways are the challenges of Westernization of these cultures, the massive influx of McDonald's and Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and Dairy Queen, the dairy industry really moving into these cultures over the last, not only the last maybe 50 or 100 years, but even before that, the last couple hundred years, bringing a lot more meat eating into Asia, which is really where most of the Buddhists in the world live, is in Asia. And so we've seen, I think, a big movement away, probably in many ways, in the daily practice of Buddhists in Asia because of Westernization. So one of the things I always like to emphasize when I'm in China or Taiwan or Asia in general to the audiences there that are basically native people is to encourage them to remember the roots of their traditions. And I think one of the things that's really quite interesting is that the whole concept, in many ways, of veganism, which we trace back to Donald Watson, who was the secretary of the Vegetarian Society, who apparently coined the word vegan, is it's really essentially a Buddhist teaching of ahimsa. Like the first precept, second precept, the first five, the main precepts, not to kill, to steal, to lie, to commit sexual abuse, to commit intoxicants or drugs against the will of other beings. All five of these things we're doing to animals. And so we're directly breaking the Buddhist precepts by eating animal foods or using animal source products. And so there's a direct awareness, I think, among Buddhist practitioners, if they're paying attention, that eating animal foods and basically using animal products is a direct violation of the fundamental precepts of Buddhism. And so this foundation, I think, is the foundation of veganism in our world today. It's so great when we go to China and can see that there are these ancient traditions of no meat, no dairy, no egg, no wool, no silk, no leather that are still practiced in the monasteries. When I was a Zen monk in Korea, that was it. That was how we lived, and traced back to the Buddhist teaching. And when the Buddhist teaching came to China in the 6th century, there was a big meeting that emperor called of the original early Buddhist leaders in China and said, okay, let's just make a policy here. Can Buddhist monks eat meat? Can Buddhist monks drink alcohol? A few basic things. And so they decided right then and there, no meat, no alcohol, that was it. And so that from China really was the foundation for most of Eastern Asia's way of practicing Buddhism. And that's been a tremendous boon, I think, to our world because, like in my own case, when I became a vegetarian originally because I visited the farm in Tennessee, which was a hippie commune. But the guidance of that hippie commune really came from Suzuki Roshi, who was a Japanese Zen master. And so it was all vegetarian. It was actually vegan, based in part on these ancient Buddhist principles. So these Buddhist teachings of compassion and ahimsa, which are foundational to Buddhism, have percolated through our Western society in many ways and have become veganism, I think. It's really a lot of the inspiration, the idea not only that we can have a better ecosystem, which is again a part of the Buddhist teaching of nonviolence to other beings and nonviolence to ecosystems, but also the idea of a spiritual path requiring us to be kind and compassionate to other beings. So Westernization really, in many ways, has been the death blow, unfortunately, to a lot of these traditions, or at least a hindering blow, continuing hindering blow, where it's considered more acceptable to eat meat. And I've seen a lot of monks, of course, coming to the United States or to the West, they started eating more meat. And then as the traditions in Asia were met by Western traditions, for the most part, it was the non-Western traditions that were hit hard by Western culture. Western culture dominates. It's very powerful economic forces, very powerful military forces, very powerful meat-eating oriented forces, introducing a cuisine and way of living based on the domination and exploitation of animals. And that just also percolated throughout Asia. People in China and Taiwan, they never ate dairy products. Now they're eating a lot of dairy. They're getting a lot of really serious health issues because of that. So that's the main issue, I would say, facing the Buddhist movement in general, is to go back as much as possible to some of these earlier roots, especially in the Mahayana tradition. The Mahayana seems to be a little more explicitly vegan-oriented in the teachings, perhaps, than the Theravadan tradition, which is something we can maybe talk about. But I'll stop there. I think that's what I think is one of the main challenge. Of course, another challenge, I'll just mention it briefly, is just the certain status that meat eating. I know you can maybe say more about this, but like when we were in Thailand, we talked to quite a few people who said, the Thai monks eat meat and it's considered a high status thing to eat meat because that's something that only the wealthy people really can do. And so when people make offerings to the Thai monks, they want to give them something really honoring them, so they give them some meat. And of course the Thai monks, after a while, they learn to kind of expect that and they like it. And so there's this rampant eating of meat in the Thai Buddhist tradition, which seems completely contrary to the spirit of ahimsa in Buddhist teaching. So these are other issues. The ways that monks have also started to view themselves and are treated by their society. What do you think, Bob? I'd like to hear more on what you think.
Thanks for starting us off, Will. So I agree with everything you said. We've talked about this a number of times. I want to pick up on a couple things you said. You ended with Thailand, and I want to start with Thailand because actually I just spoke this morning with our director in Thailand, Banks, and there are lots of challenges there, but there's also lots of room and lots of optimism. And I'll tell you both sides of it. First of all, the monks in Thailand, there are some 300,000, are almost exclusively meat eating. And they do that because of some of the things you pointed out. This is not their indigenous tradition, but it's the tradition brought over by occupying and invading forces. And there is this sense that it's higher status, it's better nutrition. Actually, it's better nutrition to be meat eating. So what we're trying to do is we're just starting our project. We started this year, and we are trying to re-educate the Thai monks about nutrition. because there's been studies done. The health of the Thai monks is much worse than the health of the general Thai population. And it doesn't take a genius to be able to connect the overwhelming amount of animal flesh and also animal products, but just animal flesh that is being eaten by Thai monks, because the lay people think that this is what the Thai monks want to eat. So the standard, you probably know this in your time as a monk, although in South Korea, that the tradition is to serve to the monks, to give to the monks as dana, as an offering of generosity by the lay people, to give to the monks the, quote, best food. Best is the word. So what does best mean? Well, you could start out with the healthiest. So it's assumed, although attitudes are changing, and DVA is trying to change those attitudes as we're speaking today. So nutritious food, of course, we all know, is not food, animal flesh and animal products. It's the opposite. This is the food that's killing people, that's producing enormous amounts of cases of diabetes and heart disease and cancer and obesity, et cetera, with everyone that's eating animals and animal products in the world, but especially the population that we are concerned about as a Buddhist organization, nonprofit, the health of the Thai monks. I mean, they're so important to the tradition of Buddhism. They're, from the original teachings of the Buddha, the Pali Canon, the Theravadan Buddhism. So we're, as an organization, we're very concerned about their health. So what we're doing day to day, we just had another presentation yesterday at one of the biggest Wats or temples in Thailand, is to talk about the health problems. It's not good to eat meat. It's exactly the opposite. This is what's causing so many of their health problems. And the good news is that the Thai monks, and especially some of the leading monks in the country at some of the leading Wats or temples, are so receptive to this. And we're getting large groups of people. The abbots, the head of the temples, and the second in command, the assistant abbots, are really engaged with us. And they're emailing us and texting our director and his assistant, asking questions as we're establishing ongoing relationships. So I don't think Thailand is so much different than the rest of Asia. We've got teachings of the Buddha, as you mentioned, about compassion and about non-harming. It couldn't be any clearer. And then you have the actual practice of eating animals and eating animal products. So there's this disconnect. And it's often based on a misunderstanding of nutrition, of what is that's supporting good health and what it is that's hindering good health. So this is our goal there. We are doing our director Banks will be getting his PhD probably by the end of the year in public health, and this is what he talks about. He talks about vegan nutrition from the point of view of public health. And then we also have two traditional Thai medicine doctors that we're working with, Dr. Ting and her husband. And we're presenting these, we call them seminars with the monks. And then also what we've done is, it's good to hear this. And I think a lot of monks are changing their attitude towards nutrition, which is really good and really healthy, we could say. But also, we're offering cooking classes now. We've only done this one time at Rama 9, one of the larger, more influential Wats in Thailand. It's one of the royal family's Wats or temples. And we offered a 3-hour cooking class, vegan cooking class. And we want to do this at each of the Wats where we're invited in Thailand. And we have our next cooking class, vegan cooking class, will be at the Monk Hospital in Bangkok. So this is a place where, unfortunately, they see so many cases of these chronic illnesses, cancer and diabetes and heart disease and obesity and high blood pressure. This is where the monks a lot of the monks are living. And while they recover, hopefully that they recover, some of them do and some of them don't. And we're going to be offering cooking classes there at the Monk Hospital in Bangkok in the near future to the cooking staff there, the ones that are serving the food to the monks that are ailing. So just saying a few words then about how what I've described in Thailand and what you've talked about really applies to other countries. We see it also in Sri Lanka and in Vietnam, where we have countrywide projects, just as we do in Thailand. And in Sri Lanka, there is more of a broad-based acceptance of vegetarianism and veganism, and no resistance at all from the monastic establishment in the country. So, maybe 30%, 30% of the monks in the country and the nuns are vegetarian or vegan, very close to being vegan, if not vegan, and maybe about the same percentage of lay people. So that we don't have to spend as much time talking about the values of veganism, because it's pretty well accepted. Instead, we're spending more time with practical questions on, am I getting enough protein if I eat a plant-based diet? Well, we all know the answer to that is, of course. No one's ever suffered from a protein deficiency. In fact, if you just eat a traditional vegan meal, as you know, you get more than enough protein. So we have to answer these questions. And we're really happy that we just received received support and endorsement from the largest medical doctors association in Sri Lanka, called the Government Medical Officers Association, GMOA. And they've been out there, even through the pandemic, talking on social media, on television, and also talking to reporters, news reporters, recommending a vegetarian diet to all of Sri Lanka. So, I mean, this is wonderful, the support we're getting. So I'm really happy about that. And I've made some trips, as you know, to other Asian countries, and we're seeing pretty much the same trends there. So what I thought we would do now, well, what do you think? In remaining time, maybe talk about, we've kind of started to cover this, but maybe we really go after it, about what the future, what are reasons to be optimistic about Asia, Buddhists, and veganism. And I should say that over 98% of the Buddhists in the world live in Asia. So we talk about Buddhism, we're really talking about Asian Buddhism, which is, of course, where it all started.
Right. Yeah, let's do that. I have a few things I'd like to just share with everyone and with you too. I think, of course, it is good, I think, also just to remember that we do have still quite a few Buddhists in the United States and Europe and Australia, I mean, in the Western countries. And I think in the West, the Buddhists, even though we're a small percentage of the whole world Buddhist community, seem to be having a pretty big impact on society. And I love seeing, for example, Thich Nhat Hanh and his movement, which is, again, pretty big in Europe and in the West, really embracing veganism. And the monks and nuns, many of the people are now completely abandoning meat, dairy, and eggs because of Dharma principles. And so I think it's great to see the positive changes that are happening. In fact, I even, for example, was invited to speak at a Tibetan Buddhist center, and for that was like unheard of. I mean, Tibetan Buddhist centers were completely never wanting to hear anything about veganism. That was like really forbidden. But now they're open to it. And I think a lot of it has to do with what you're saying, that people are realizing, number one, of course, there's that underlying issue of karuna, the great compassion, that we're as bodhisattvas or stream enterers, whatever, is people on the path that we're working to cultivate, but also the health aspect that so many monks and nuns are sick from the Western diet. Like everybody gets sick from eating all that saturated fat and cholesterol and acidifying and inflammatory animal protein. So the best thing we can do for the health of the monks, which I think is really important, and nuns and lay people, is to educate people about the many the health benefits of plant-based diet, but also not just stopping there. I think it's good to talk about the psychological health, the spiritual health, the cultural health, environmental health, how these are all interconnected. And so I'd like to mention just a couple of the examples that I've seen that have been enormously, I would just say, like hope producing for me. when I was especially in Taiwan, also in mainland China, also in Korea, but I found in Taiwan, there were several movements that I think people are completely unaware of because they don't publicize, they don't promote or anything, but there's quite a few teachers and Buddhist teachers in Taiwan who are vegan and who even use the word vegan and who have many students. I mean, we're talking about in the millions, millions of students. There's one that's translated in English as Bliss and Wisdom, which is probably the most active in promoting what we would call veganism. And there's other ones, Tzu Chi, which is a very large movement, and they have centers all over the world that are like where we live in Northern California. Just as one example, when we have the fires come through, the local Tzu Chi chapter in Santa Rosa gives complimentary vegan meals to people who've lost their homes. And this is all over the United States, Africa, Europe, other places, Asia, where there's tragedies and disasters. These Buddhist lay people and also monastics deliver vegan food, rice and vegetables to people, and it's basically plant-based. They're really specific about that. There's several other large movements, Dharma Drum, and some other ones that are vegan in their orientation that are based in Taiwan. But this one, Bliss and Wisdom, I could talk a long time. I'll try to keep it brief, but I was just enormously impressed with the tremendous grassroots movement that they have undergone to bring veganism and also organic farming. And to me, organic and vegan really support each other. They're very important. Organic is very important because when we start spraying herbicides and pesticides and fungicides and all that, we're killing birds and fish and insects and really destroying ecosystems. And so the founder of the Bliss and Wisdom was a Chinese monk who really got involved actually with the Tibetan tradition and sort of brought this Taiwanese, Chinese, Tibetan tradition, kind of created a synthesis of that. And he was looking at a field in Taiwan. This is sort of in the early days, and noticed that there were some dead ducks there. And he asked, "Why are the ducks dead here? What's happening?" Oh, it's because of they use pesticides to, and so the ducks died. And so he started weeping and just felt this is wrong. And so this is a beautiful example, I think, of like one person or one small group. At that point, it was a small group of students. He only had a few students at that point, but he just thought, what we should do is try to promote organic. And at that point in Taiwan, there was very little organic. It was pretty much Western style. They were on the U.S. model. The U.S. big agribusiness had moved in. And so they talked to a few farmers and said, if you will go organic, and they would teach them how to do it, not use chemicals and not use chemical fertilizers, we'll buy from you. So they supported farmers, and they opened up one small store in Taipei, and they started selling organic food in this one small store. And lo and behold, it was basically successful. And students started buying it, and they started telling their friends, and then they started getting a few more farmers involved. And they opened a second store, and they got more farmers, and they opened a third store, and they opened a fourth store. And so I went over to Taiwan back in 2014. And at that point, they had about 65 stores all over Taiwan, these health food stores selling organic vegetables and organic products and basically vegan oriented. And many of them have a restaurant or a dining hall associated with very inexpensive, really healthy, basic food where you can go and just eat grains and veggies, and it's only like $1 or $2. And people love it. People would just flock there. It would be totally packed with people. It's extremely successful. And then I went back again in 2019, and they were like at 110 stores around Taiwan. 110 stores. I mean, boom! This is booming. It's really big. All over every neighborhood of Taipei and all over the whole island of Taiwan, there are these stores that are promoting veganism with vegan restaurants and with organic. It's all organic, which I think is so wonderful. And then they took us to a school, and there's this whole. I thought it was just some little school. They've built very impressive whole campus for young people from 5 years old all the way up through high school, and then they also have the university. And the whole thing is vegan. The whole thing is organic. They grow their own food, and they teach the children how to grow food. So it was just, again, very inspiring to go into the fields with these little kids, the fifth, sixth grades or third, fourth grades, and how the younger kids are helped by the older kids. It's a very communal, very loving, very gentle, beautiful kind of an education that these kids get. And it's just permeated with Dharma teachings where they're spinning prayer wheels and they're chanting Om Mani Padme Hum and compassion for all beings, and growing their own food and gardening. And we had so many wonderful talks with these kids, and a lot of them spoke English. I mean, they really learned many languages. And I was just so impressed with their educational level, the just tremendous, just the ethical high standards that these kids have, and their academic level. And so we saw that kind of educational system, again, that's growing very quickly. And then also how they work with the local farmers. And we went to this one farm where it was in a beautiful area up high in Taiwan, where all the farmers used pesticides and herbicides. And when we went there, the little village, there were all these three-legged dogs walking around. All these dogs with only three legs, and they had lost one of their legs in the traps, because the farmers had to set traps to catch the monkeys. There's all these monkeys, and the monkeys will come into the fields and they'll just eat and just eat all the cabbages, and they'll eat all the food. And so the farmers traditionally would set traps. And so again, the Bliss and Wisdom group went into this whole community of farmers and said, we'll teach you how to grow organically. And so they started teaching them and buying the food. They said, we'll buy it from you, so you don't have to worry. You have a market and we'll sell it. And so they were doing that. But what was really interesting was that these farmers, and I talked to this farmer, and the farmer was an alcoholic. He was abusing his wife. He said, farming is such a hard thing. You have a good year, you have a bad year, you have these animals, you have all kinds of problems. The problems with the markets, the price goes up, the price goes down, the weather. It's a really hard thing to be a farmer. And so he was really, they just go through this. There's a struggle. So they also had all these farmers go to Dharma classes, so they would actually teach them about, Buddhist teaching. And so the farmers themselves, it was so neat to see this guy, how he said, now I understand that life is eternal. And it's not just about how well I do financially and this and that, it's really about life. And he now has a feeling for the other animals. And there was a biologist there. They especially brought a biologist in to show us and he did a whole slide presentation of how incredibly the wildlife has now returned. Now that they're not using pesticides and traps and all this, they've got all these birds and deer. And so now more tourists are coming. The whole economy of that region is booming because people are much happier and the food is being sold. And so it's like a virtuous circle that's building by teaching people not only about organic and veganism, but also the spiritual teachings that support that. And there was another guy, just to finish up here and then I'll stop, who was sort of a similar position. He was a criminal. He was in he also had a farm. This was in a different area. And he got very violent, and then he started selling pork, I guess, in one of these markets. And again, he could see his daughter going down a bad pathway, and he was worried about her, and he was a drug addict also. And so anyway, they came in and they taught him about Buddhism, and they said, if you'd like to become a farmer again, we'll help you become organic and vegan. so he's got this beautiful farm now. And then all these inmates who were in the local prison, the judge realized apparently that it was a good practice to send the inmates, if they were on good behavior, to this guy's farm, and they would work there, and that as like a halfway place, and they could go back into society. So this whole movement now is now helping prisoners who would normally be stuck in prisons and eating terrible food. Now they're learning how to garden organically, how to become vegan, and they're working together. And so there's like all these different levels of the Dharma through this one movement, that one Bliss and Wisdom movement, starting this idea of organic and vegan, then helping children, helping prisoners, helping farmers, helping old people. It's all it's providing meals for poor people, providing meals for the elderly. They do that in all this network of vegan and organic stores they have all over Taiwan. So it was a very inspiring, and it's rooted in monasticism. They have these gigantic monasteries where monks and nuns by the hundreds. We went and visited. They have huge monasteries where they're really just practicing hard, meditating and chanting and reciting and doing all that. But then they have this that gives rise to seems like a very strong lay community, which is bringing the vegan message to the whole community of Taiwan, and then it's spreading from there, of course, now gradually more and more into the West and into other places. And even when we were in Malaysia, when we were in Indonesia, there were Taiwanese Buddhists that were starting schools and hospitals and restaurants that were vegan in these other countries. So it's really percolating out. I mean, to me, Taiwan is by far the most vegan country in the world, and it's really because of the Buddhist influence there and the enthusiasm that these people have for the Buddhist teachings and for health and for environmentalism. And it's all interconnected. So I think this kind of positive vision can really, it would be great to see this continuing in a variety of different ways. And I think Buddhism is uniquely situated to help do that, as we see, for example, in this one case I'm talking about.
Thanks, Will. Also, I'm happy you mentioned the United States, because I'm sitting here in San Diego County, Southern California, and talking about Asia. So yeah, the overwhelming majority of Buddhists in the world live in Asia, but there are millions of Buddhists living in this country, in Europe, and Australia, and Canada, and all through the Western world, South America, and even Africa has Dharma centers and all. So we talk about Buddhism, we really have to talk about the entire world. So in Taiwan, I was there after you, but between your two trips, and I remember the stores, the Bliss and Wisdom stores, and amazing organic farming. Also, want to mention Master Haitao, who's worked with DVA, Dharma Voices for Animals, for since 2014 when I went out there. Has like millions of followers, and gets up there at a puja where he is. It's like an all-day festival, and they're chanting and meditating and exchanging Dharma teachings and stories. And of course, he was speaking in Chinese, and so I had an interpreter there to interpret much of what he was saying. And he spent like over an hour after introducing me, and I spoke to the crowd through my interpreter, talking about the value of vegetarianism. And when he uses the term vegetarianism or vegetarian, he's really talking about veganism. He is, as you mentioned, he is absolutely intentionally vegan, no animal products at all. And so what an inspiration. Go to an 8-hour festival and hear talks about the benefits, and from a really optimistic, generous, life-affirming point of view, not so much negative, just spreads the joy of veganism. And he's doing this every day of his life, as are the other grandmasters on the island of Taiwan, and the best vegetarian restaurants. Singapore has really good ones too. There are a lot of good ones all over Asia. I know you've been to a lot of them. Also, I've spent some time, as you mentioned, in Malaysia, in Singapore, also in South Korea, China, and Taiwan, as we talked about. So each of these countries has its own challenges, and benefits, and challenges, and cultural, language, tradition, etc. But there are common threads in these either Buddhist countries or countries with really significant Buddhist populations, and it's the teachings of the Buddha. And whether it's the old teachings of Theravada, the Pali Canon, or the more modern teachings of Mahayana, there's different interpretations of what the Buddha said, but no one disagrees. Everyone agrees that the Buddha's message was universal compassion, karuna. So absolutely included in this circle of compassion are all beings who can feel pain, sentient beings. This is the way we say that in English. So how can we express compassion for a being while we're biting into it, chewing and swallowing it? It's so it's so opposite of the message, and the message of not harming that the Buddha spread that message. It's explicit in all of the teachings, whatever tradition we're talking about. So this is what we have in common. When you go out there, when Dharma Voices for Animals goes out there, or you go out there wearing different hats, it's the same message, and it's a powerful message. And what we can do together, working together, is what we've been doing, and is to talk to people about the advantages and the reasons to be vegetarian, to be vegan. So we talked about compassion, nothing more important than that. We haven't talked about environmental impact, being kind to the earth. And of course, you can't be kind to the earth when you're supporting factory farming. It's the greatest destruction of the environment, the greatest cause of global warming in the world today. And then health. And so I have found, at least in Sri Lanka, Thailand, and Vietnam, that the biggest obstacle to people becoming vegetarian is misconceptions about what is healthy and what's not. And I really believe in my heart that if we can work with doctors and other healthcare providers and nutritionists and scientists to give people the truth about nutrition, what is harming their health, animals and animal products, and what's supporting their health and helping their health, vegan products, we're going to see a terrific transition in all the countries in the world. Also wanted to mention something you touched on, which I think is really important. We mentioned this in the first part of our conversation, and that is we want Buddhists in the world, and Asians, and especially those that have been living in countries that have been invaded and occupied by Western countries over the years, to return to their roots, because most of these cultures and countries were substantially vegetarian before the invasion and occupation began. So we're asking folks in Sri Lanka, folks in Thailand, folks in Vietnam to get back to their roots, to remember what it was like, to read about what's like. They don't have personal memory because it happened a long time ago. There's lots of books written about this, to get back to their roots when they were living in harmony with the environment and harmony with the animals. So
that's a great point. Yeah, I love that, and I always emphasize the same thing: the importance of getting back to their roots. And I think when I say it to an audience, I always feel this kind of like they're just thirsty for that, and they love to hear that, especially from a Westerner. They we've gone down this road. We realize in many ways we need to learn from you, right? You're the ones that actually were pioneering a healthier and more harmonious way of eating and living, while we were creating more bombs and weapons. And so we were able to conquer the world, but actually that's a dead end path. So we have more humility. We'd like to learn from your wisdom. And I just see that more and more happening, that this whole idea of might makes right, which is really the foundation of animal agriculture, and in many ways of the way the world is being run, to come back to a more sane and dharmic way of living, to exemplify that. And so I think what Dharma Voices for Animals is doing, what I'm doing with the World Peace Dive, it's the same thing. We're just working together to help encourage this message, and to see tremendous, deep-rooted traditions like on mainland China. I didn't really talk about them too much, but the same thing. There's quite a few monasteries where they're vegan. I mean, the monasteries are vegan. The people are. They have vegan schools, and they're doing their best to promote it to the laity. And so there's a lot of good news around these things, and I think especially now with COVID-19 and I think more awareness about the importance of health and having a healthy immune system and so forth. This is a more important time than ever. Plus the basic idea that as you sow, so shall you reap. The karmic idea. If we're going to inflict violence and abuse and imprisonment and exploitation on billions of beings, we're going to reap the same thing. So it's really important, I think, in the Buddhists, I think, understand this. If we want to have a world where peace and freedom and justice are possible, then animals we're called to give them the peace and freedom and harmony that we would like to have for ourselves. So this is it. This is a very crucial time we're living in, and I know we don't want to go too long here, Bob. But do you have any other final thoughts you want to share here? Or?
Yeah, just a couple other thoughts, Will.
Yeah.
It's been a big pleasure to share this with you. You mentioned COVID-19 and the pandemic for sure, and what we know this from the experts on public health and the doctors that spend their lifetime studying this, that almost every single pandemic the world has ever known comes directly from humans eating animals. And I mean, what better time to mention this and discuss this than now? We're right in the middle of the pandemic. In the United States, almost 1 million people almost 1 million new cases every single week in this country. And there seems to be total disconnect about what the cause of this is. So again, it's health, environment, and it's compassion. It all comes together and just in one package. Just watching what we put into our bodies is so crucial. And I also wanted to mention, and then give you time if you want to talk about this. You're listening to this, and yes, okay, this is great. So what can I do? Maybe you're thinking about it. So one thing you can do, just a small act, but it's important, is become a member of Dharma Voices for Animals. So you can go to our website. It's just Dharma Voices, S at the end, plural, for animals.org, and you can become a member. And then you get our e-newsletter, and you support us just by being a member. You grow our organization. And then we just send a newsletter out. We send out.
We have a prayer that we say, compassion encircles the earth for all beings everywhere. And we have a lot, thousands of people around the world are saying that and kind of connecting with the truth of compassion and just the teachings, really, of the ancient wisdom traditions of Buddhism that bring this teaching. We have a new book called Buddhism and Veganism, which has teachings. Bob has an essay in there too, and as well as some monks from China and around the world. So I think the idea is, we both, Bob and I, would love to be in touch with you, and if you have questions or can in any way, if you can contribute to helping raise awareness in your part of the world, to help make the connection between the ancient wisdom of the Dharma and how we're living our lives and the problems we're having. It's really us. It's really our generation, our time here to. If we're going to pass on a world for our children, it's really critical time. It's really critical time. I think we all know that. So these teachings are more valuable and more precious probably than ever, it seems to me anyway. And so I really appreciate everyone's attention. Love to be in touch with you. So dharmavoicesforanimals.org or worldpeacediet.com. You can find out more about all the work I'm doing there. And thanks.
Great. It's great. Pleasure, Will. We'll get together again soon. And this is a great festival. I'm very grateful to be a part of it.
Right.
Bye, everybody. Take care, Will.
Thanks. Yeah.
See ya.
Oh, 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 yeah.